Let me make a little vow to you. I will cancel this show before I ever talk politics on this college football show. But one bit of commentary I do think I can deliver that means a lot as to how big tonight's show is. Did you notice that there was pretty seismic activity in the form of a man withdrawing himself from the upcoming election, and he's not even going to address the nation tonight? Why? Maybe not because he doesn't want to, but because I think the White House is keenly aware of how big tonight's show is. We're jam-packed high atop a buzzing downtown Nashville, Tennessee. It's Late Kick Live, Sunday night, July 21st, the year of our Lord 2024. Academy Sports and Outdoors, wind in our sails. Why is this show so big tonight? Well, it's big because we're doing something we don't normally do. Frankly, I thought our show sucked last week, and so I thought we needed a little boost. And so we took the needle and we stuck it in the programming and the rundown, and now all of a sudden we're doing conference championship predictions. Tonight, not the last week of August, tonight. We know plenty enough about these teams to talk about it tonight. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, if you're going to predict the conferences, what about the playoff? You want to do it? Yeah, all right, let's just do college football playoff predictions tonight. Colin, in fact, I want you to go ahead and just prepare to crown a national champ tonight, with the understanding we reserve our right to change our minds throughout the entire month of August, because as Meemaw once said, that's what God made August for. We've got week one upset alerts on the show tonight. I've got what ifs. I've got bold predictions. And we will have thousands upon thousands tune in for none of that, because at the end of tonight's show, or sooner if I feel so inclined, I am going to deviate from college football for the one time that I do it per year, and I'm giving you a full review of Twisters, because I saw it last night. And with bated breath, the world awaits, yes, what I think about that movie. Got a lot to say. I mean, a lot to say. So, yeah, we're doing all that on tonight's show. So, you know, if there's no addressing of the nation tonight on the political end, it's probably just because of what's happening here on the college football end. At least that's what we tell ourselves. They're watching us in Athens, Ohio, Eastman, Georgia, Norman, Oklahoma. Frankfurt, Germany is tuned in. At Late Kick Josh. Make sure you're following socials. Got a lot going on this week. We're going to be on the road this week, and we'll be up in Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Days. You never know what could be happening this week, though. Big announcements. You noticed we've been strangely quiet on things like gas station recruiting wars. What happened? Did that just dry up? No, quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. So, at Late Kick Josh, if you're so inclined. Okay. I felt that this was as good a time as any to let you know that, well, I'm ready to announce my conference championship predictions tonight. We have 4 Power 4 conferences now, so it doesn't take quite as long to get around the country, shamefully. But I digress. Let's start in the Big Ten. The Big Ten is adding a number of teams this year. I think 4 of them stand out. I think Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State kind of still need to see the offense there, but Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, you got Penn State there. USC's here. I'm going to talk about them a little bit later tonight because there's a thing that could happen at USC this year that would absolutely insert them into the mainframe conversation of who wins the Big Ten. But Ohio State versus Oregon is my conference championship matchup and prediction. I think that's going to be the most common matchup that people predict. It's the best 2 rosters in the conference. It's the preseason number 1 and number 2 to win the Big Ten. I fully believe Ohio State, if they need to, can ride defense. I don't think they'll need to. Like Will Howard, I don't have him as the top quarterback in the conference. Actually, I have Dylan Gabriel at Oregon as the top quarterback in the conference. But even if he's not, in fact, even if that offensive line lets them down early in the year, I don't think it's going to be some, chronic, like ingrown toenail of a problem on their roster to where they can't win. But if they need to buy themselves some time, they may have the best defense in the country, let alone the Big Ten. So I've got them matching up against Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. Remember, they play in the regular season. Ohio State goes to Eugene in the middle part of the season. So who wins that one? I don't think there's a whole lot of skill in penciling in W's and L's. But however that one shakes out, I've got them rematching in Indy. And in Indianapolis with a conference championship on the line as of today, I've got Ohio State winning the Big Ten. And that would give Ohio State, obviously, a first-round bye in the college football playoff. More on that down the road. And by down the road, I mean like in 20 minutes on this show. Next up, let's travel to the SEC. This is going to be strange, so you got to understand now, this is not just the JP poll. I've got the JP poll coming for you next week, by the way, but it's not just simple as power rating these teams. I've got Georgia power rated as the number 1 team in this conference. I've got Georgia as a top 2 team. Yeah, that sounds suspicious, but that's because it is. I've got Georgia power rated sky high. Excellent portal moves. They get Carson Beck back. Schedule matters here, though. I don't have this massive gap between Georgia and the next 3 or 4 teams in the SEC like some people do. I was at SEC Media Days last week, and the talk around the media water cooler was it's Georgia and everyone else. I don't quite think that's the case, although I do agree that they are the best of the bunch, but they're not so far above and beyond as to make me think they're just going to buzz through at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss, and go unscathed. Now, they don't have to go unscathed to get the conference championship, but if they are scathed, then it could mean that teams like Texas or teams like Alabama or teams like Ole Miss were ones to trip them up, which gives those teams a leg up on them when it comes to the conference standing. So you know who I put in the SEC championship game? I got Ole Miss in the SEC championship game because I hate them so much, and I've got Texas in the SEC championship game. Both are very dependable teams. I think they're both well-rounded. I think Ole Miss defensively will come into form and be as well-rounded a product as we've seen them be under Lane Kiffin. It's a must-win moment this year for them. I think there's pressure, but pressure they can deliver upon over there. I think Ole Miss will be a player-led team this year. A lot of talk about guys like Judkins walking out. Not a whole lot of talk about the Ulysses Bentleys of the world. But he'll be a star in their offense. He'll be a star, and most of you don't even know who that is yet, but you will. Texas versus Ole Miss has a lot to do with how good the teams are and has a lot to do with the fact that they just flat out got more workable schedules, and Georgia's got to come to both of those buildings. And so it's tough, man. There's no team in the country that I'd predict going undefeated with Georgia's schedule, Georgia included. So I got Texas winning the SEC, which I don't need to tell anyone would be a pretty big story. But as of right now, I got Texas winning the SEC. I think they will draw a lot upon what they did last year. Last year, they got a taste, and then they got a taste when they got to the playoff. That means something. They got to replace a lot offensively. Quarterback, not among them. But I just think the overall profile of the program is such that if they step into a conference, especially if they step in having recruited to it for 3 years before they ever got here, and they click this year, I think they can be in Atlanta, and I think they can win the whole thing. And that would give Texas an SEC championship and a first-round bye and a top 4 seed in the playoff. Still got to get used to saying that. Next up, in the ACC, I saw a viable path for Virginia Tech. I still do. I see a viable path for NC State. Of course, you've got Florida State. You've got Clemson. You've got Miami here. To me, if you're going to call your shot on one of these upset teams, one of these dark horse teams, that's okay. It's really tough to have any skill in doing any of this. It's really, really tough to have skill in knowing which of those somewhat less talented rosters will completely maximize their potential. Because there's a world where Virginia Tech, although they haven't recruited heads up with Miami or Florida State or Clemson, ends up playing for a conference title just because they squeezed every drop out of their sponge this year. But in the absence of being able to predict that, I'm going to go with one of these top 3. Florida State, Clemson, Miami are 1, 2, 3 right now. I think it's going to be a rematch of a regular season game, and I think that rematch is actually going to be the rematch that people feared when they first formed this version of the ACC finally, after it feels like dozens of years. How about Florida State versus Miami for the ACC championship? They play in the regular season. I got them playing again in Charlotte for the conference crown. I trust the entire organization at Florida State. So it doesn't even matter to me so much that maybe DJ is not quite Jordan Travis. And it may not matter to me so much that there is a lot of little question marks where there used to be proven production offensively there. I just trust that they'll fill it. I'll trust that in the aggregate, they'll Billy Bean it, man. They'll find a way, and they'll put together a very, very solid playoff contending type team. I think Cam Ward's going to be a breakout star at Miami. I think in year 3 under Cristobal, where you've gone 5-7 to 7-5, 7-6, if you count the bowl game, it's natural that they take that leap this year. And I think that also that game against Virginia Tech they have week 5 is a big one. Not being talked about a lot right now. That's a Friday night game. That's a big one. Right now, with Florida State, Miami in the ACC championship game, I'd lean Florida State to win it. And that would mean Florida State has a conference championship, has a first-round bye, and has a top 4 seed. There's also a lot to be said for what happened to them last year. And if what happened to them last year has any carryover effect, I think the carryover effect would be having the collective organizational attitude of not leaving a doubt. You don't let it rest in a committee member's hands. You salt the earth, you leave no doubt in anyone's mind, and then even if they don't like you, even if they've got an axe to grind, you win that conference championship, they got to put you in. And they got to put you in one of those top 4 spots. That's the ACC. The odds right now are Florida State, Clemson, Miami, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to take number 1 versus number 3, at least according to FanDuel odds. And in the Big 12, I had to get a new piece of paper, actually, because in the Big 12, I had 7 different matchup combinations in 1 hour to play for the Big 12 championship game. 9 teams in this conference right now, according to FanDuel, have plus 1,600 or better odds to win it. So, to say the least, I could be talked off of this. But at the same time, I want to very counterintuitively say I am steadfast in this prediction. Someone's lying, and there's only one person in the room here, so paper pop. Oklahoma State versus Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. As my own production team scoffs in my ear, in a few months, I'll be accepting multiple apologies in this building. The run game for Oklahoma State is enough for them to ride to a conference championship, I think. You got about 1 million returning starts on the offensive line. You've got the best running back in the country in Ollie Gordon. You've got a lot of dependability there. If Alan Bowman, and I hope he's listening with both fingers crossed, if Alan Bowman can just cut down on the turnovers for me, you've got the experience, okay? You've been there. You've seen the conference. You've got a favorable schedule. Utah has to come to you early in the season, and that's week 4. And then after that, you go to Kansas State. That's Oklahoma State's season right there. Week 4, week 5, or week 5, week 6. Yeah, week 4, week 5. Not that I discount West Virginia, because that's one of our sleeper games of the year, Oklahoma State, West Virginia in week 4, 5, 6. I think that's their season. And I think that they'll actually be able to go toe-to-toe physically with those teams. I said that once upon a time before and ended up not being right about it 2 years ago. So I hope I'm right here. I got Oklahoma State and I've got Iowa State. Iowa State, it's just one of those build towards years for them. Quarterback, check. Love what they are at running back. Love for Iowa State what they are at wide receiver. And so it's a top 10 returning production team. The over-under win total is 7.5 there, which is really high for Iowa State. It's not high for Alabama. It's high for Iowa State. They have to peak late. Their season, this is the kind of team that could start off 2, 4, 6, 8-0, but their last 4 games include at Kansas, at Utah, and Kansas State. So it's going to be one thing. It's going to be like 2 seasons for Iowa State. One of them is getting to November, and then the other one's getting through November. Well, my thinking here is if Iowa State's there, of course no bias is baked into this prediction. If Iowa State's there, it's probably because they beat one or both of Utah and Kansas State to get there. And therefore, that's how they make it in, and that's how you have the suspicious absence of Utah and Kansas State. Oklahoma State, though, is actually the team I would take to win it because I think Oklahoma State profiles pretty well in that kind of setting. And they got there last year, and last year, man, think about how different that ending of the season could have gone. You had a weird game where Oklahoma State had to go to Brigham Young, and they ended up coming from behind and winning the thing. Therefore, they go and get their brains beat in by Texas. Had they lost that game, it was going to be Texas versus Oklahoma, part 2 in Dallas. And I don't know that Texas wouldn't have still won the thing, but it would have been a little different feel, I guess. So I got Oklahoma State in the Big 12 right now. I've got FSU in the ACC. I have got Texas in the SEC. And I've got Ohio State in the Big 10. What order would those teams be in? Don't know yet. We will in a few minutes. But those would be your top 4 seeds. Those would be the teams with first-round byes. How does anyone feel about that? How do Ole Miss fans feel? How do Oregon fans feel that they don't get a first-round bye, but Oklahoma State does? Well, don't talk to me. Talk to the folks who love the concept of auto bids. That's conference championships. We'll do playoff predictions in just a little while. Oh, and, a full Twisters review in the show. Where are you getting variety like this? Anywhere else across the college football digital media landscape? So, look at that, man. Even as we're on the air, college football nerds, although they should be watching the show right now, they were watching Twister with their little ones. So we got another solid positive review here. They keep coming in by the hour. As you know, EA Sports has released CFP 25, and we partnered with them, and we did a ton of exclusive ahead of release date content. We loved all that. But also what I loved is Team Builder is back. And as I expected over the weekend, as some of you finally got your hands on the game, you guys have figured out that, whoa, you can play with Pate State. And I haven't even done that great a job of making sure you have all the assets. Like our best logos, I still have to tweet out. Remind me of that, Jesse. Well, some of you have not even waited. And so you've created Pate State. The Freights is our mascot, by the way. Partly because it rhymes and partly because I love trains. That's it. That's all you have to do to have a mascot. So, I mean, you guys have named the stadium all different sorts of things. You have rightly chosen for us to play on natural grass. Anyone who has us playing on anything else is high, out of their mind, and has never listened to me before. Checkerboarding the end zone was a very interesting decision. Okay, we've got the black and the orange color scheme, but let me let you in on a little secret. Don't get married to that color scheme, because it may be that just any given moment I drop an entirely new design on you, complete with new colors. It's no secret that I'm a fan of the red and yellow around here. Red, white, and blue, not too bad either. So don't get married to the color palette is my point. But we're going to be sending some Chalice of Supremacy out, because any of you who go to the trouble to build Pate State and then you start winning with Pate State and then you publicize it, especially if I see fit to retweet it, then yeah, that's worth a chalice, I believe. So be on the lookout. Be on the lookout. Check those DMs, by the way. All right, let's move along. I have got playoff predictions coming up in a little while. I did want to get to this first, though, because I did not want that to become monotonous, so I did want to break it up a little bit. Jesse comes to me today, and Jesse says, you know what we need to do? We need to look at week 1. And I said, why? And he said, well, because Jake Hopkins says so. I said, Jake Hopkins? Whomst? He said, look at this tweet. Here we go. Jake from Fort Worth, Texas. He said, recently, ranked teams have gone down to unranked teams in week 1. Duke beat Clemson last year. Florida beat Utah the year before. Virginia Tech beat North Carolina the year before that. So in 2024, which highly ranked team will drop a week 1 game? So I did a couple of things. I asked the staff, give me a list of some of the notable games, because not all of these feature ranked versus unranked. We don't even have the AP poll out yet. The JP poll's not even meant for this sort of thing. But here's an idea of what we got coming up. So we got like Florida State, Georgia Tech in week 0. That game's in Ireland. We got Penn State, West Virginia. Clemson, Georgia's a neutral site. Both of those teams will be ranked, but Georgia's like a 13-point favorite. Miami's at Florida in week 1, true road game. Fresno State at Michigan. So I'm going to break down 3 of these. I'm going to leave Clemson, Georgia alone because both of those teams will be ranked. But let's talk about this for a second. Can Georgia Tech beat Florida State? I just picked Florida State to win the ACC. So naturally, I'm putting an upset alert in week 1. This is week 0, actually. And it's in Ireland. And when I think about college football games in Ireland, I think about 2 years ago. And I think about Northwestern upsetting Nebraska en route to a 1-11 season. Thus was the Scott Frost era at Nebraska. They go over there to Ireland. They lose. Northwestern hangs a goose egg the rest of the year in the win column. 1-11. The one win in Ireland against Nebraska. So one thing that Florida State is not, and that is Nebraska, circa Scott Frost. However, I believe in Georgia Tech's offense. I believe in Haynes King. Didn't say that so much when he was in College Station, but I'll say it now. They return a ton. They finished very strong. It's a team that is sure of itself. Now, if you can slice their defense up, Florida State can win this going away. The question about week 1 in college football any given year, when you have so much roster churn, is DJU coming in and doing that? Do they have the established playmaking ability on the perimeter to just, boom, right out of the gate do that? Week 6, they probably do. I'm picking them to win the conference right now because of that. But in week 1 or week 0, anything can happen. And Georgia Tech, if they can make the game ugly, if it's not and it's like 17-14 at the end of the first quarter, if it's not that kind of game, if it's like 6-3 at the end of the first quarter, that's the kind of game where you let Brent Key's team hang around and they are looking for that signature win and no one even knows where they are. You can't even find it on GPS. The phone's all messed up. Where are we? Dublin, Georgia? No, Dublin, Ireland. I'm just saying, it's a week 0 game, so let's keep an eye on that one. Let's keep an eye on Penn State at West Virginia. West Virginia last year entered the season with Neil Brown on everyone's hot seat list, and then what they did was they found their identity. They discovered who they were, and they finished 9-4. And now no one talks about Neil Brown on the hot seat. Now people who really want to sound hip, they sort of get in the back of the room and they whisper, sleeper team. West Virginia, sleeper team. Well, you got Garrett Green at quarterback. Solid. Penn State, offensive line. Are they as good as they were last year? In other words, can they go in this game and lean on West Virginia? Drew Aller, new offensive system on the road. Extremely hostile will be Morgantown for that game. And so week 3, I'd feel a little bit better about this. Week 1, this is college football, man. What's the line, Jesse? Penn State minus about 10.5 right now at FanDuel. So, I mean, we see that every week, much less in week 1s in the past. West Virginia, I would say not more of a known commodity. We know what Penn State wants to do, but the thing is they want to do a whole lot more this year. But we're not talking about this year. We're talking about week 1. So Penn State could find themselves in a dogfight down there. That's a true road game. That's not neutral site. And thank you guys for that. And then I'm going to take a little bit more of a flyer here, and I need to probably yell. Fresno State at Michigan State. Michigan is, or not Michigan State, would be very competitive. Fresno State is at Michigan, week 1. The line on the game is 20.5. I need to ask you to do one thing, and that's just calm down. Everyone calm down. My Michigan folks, calm down. This isn't a prediction segment. This isn't you're going down week 1. It's just, it's meant to present it. It's meant to ask questions. You lose the pieces you do offensively. Am I supposed to blindly assume that you just dive right back in and it's all seamless? Fresno State, returning quarterback, top 3 offensive production returning. They're a good team. They've won 29 games the last 3 years. This is an organization that knows how to win. Now, they've had upheaval at the head coaching position, but you guys have found out within the past year what happens to a veteran team when it loses its leader. Sometimes that can galvanize. So let's not just assume that you've got some shaky G5 operation coming in here in week 1. Alex Orji, if things click right out of the gate, Michigan should steamroll them. Things don't always click right out of the gate, is the point. So those are some of the notable games, and if you're talking upset, those are some of the games where I'd at least keep my eyes peeled. Now, what we don't see is we don't see the 30-point favorite out of nowhere trailing in the fourth quarter. That can also happen in week 1. You know what it's time to do? Time to do a couple of things. Well, it's always time to play outdoors, play sports. It is almost back to school time, though. And I know it's July. But as Meemaw used to tell me, they start earlier and earlier these days. And that's actually a trend that's never stopped. School just keeps starting earlier and earlier and earlier every year. Academy Sports and Outdoors knows this. They cannot stop it, children. They cannot save you. They can clothe you, okay? They can make you look better than all of your friends, unless your friends' parents are also watching the show. Anyway, Academy Sports and Outdoors, back to school, back to sports. They are bringing this show to you tonight, free of charge. And so we thank them for that. They already have stuff you need anyway. What we ask, a small token of appreciation, is just for you to check them out. Maybe you don't even end up buying at Academy, although I'd be willing to bet you do when you see the selection. But just check them out. And if you can't get there in person, academy.com has you covered. These are wonderful people. They are us. They are us. Any of you who are, diehard college football fans, you know what I mean by that. You know when there are companies floating around out there that try and pose, and then you know the ones who could walk in the room and blend right in. The folks who are making decisions at Academy are ones who could walk into a room full of us and blend right in. I hope I haven't been unclear there. So they pick up what we're putting down, and they pick up the tab for the show and deliver it to you free of charge. So we appreciate that. Academy.com, unless you can get there in person. If you can get there in person, just go in person. This is a very, very consequential segment I have coming up here. Because for better or for worse, I will be nailed to this piece of paper from now moving forward. Colin, afford me 5 seconds to take a swig out of the nondescript water jug. Public spring water. It's public spring water. We've got to stay hydrated. Number one, because we did legs before the show. And number two, because this is going to be pretty controversial. I already disagree with some of this, but I got to roll with what I have. College football playoff predictions. In July? Yes, in July. Let's go. Conference champs. I've got Oklahoma State winning the Big 12. I got Florida State winning the ACC. I got Texas winning the SEC. And I got Ohio State winning the Big 10. But what order do we have them in? I've got the top 4 seeds having first-round buys in this order. I've got Ohio State, number 1 team in the country, entering the playoff, Big 10 champs. The SEC champion Texas, I've got as the number 2 overall seed. Sark just got a raise based on this segment. I've got FSU as the ACC champion, number 3 seed. Feels a lot different than last year already. Oklahoma State, there you go. You win your conference. You're one of the 4 highest-ranked conference champs. You get a first-round bye. You get the 4 seed. So we know that because they won the conferences. This is where it gets really, really interesting because we have 15 to 20 to maybe 25, depending on how optimistic you are, teams that could viably have a path to the playoff. So here's my great unknown. As we dive into teams 5 through 8, these are teams that are going to have not a first-round bye, but they're going to have a first-round game on their home campus. How is the committee going to handle teams like Oregon, who I have playing against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game and losing? How are they going to handle Oregon? And let's just say Notre Dame sitting there as a 1-loss team and they're ranked 6th or something like that. Does Oregon drop behind them because they went and played a conference title game and lost? Does Ole Miss drop behind Notre Dame, a team that didn't play? Or let's even take a team like Alabama or Georgia or someone like that, who they don't even make the conference title game. They could be floating in that 6, 7, 8 range. Do any of these teams that are already highly ranked, that are ranked above those teams, but they go add an extra loss because they played in their conference title game, is there precedent for those teams dropping below? My feel, because that committee wants to maintain the sanctity and the importance of conference championship games, is they'll be very hesitant to drop these conference title game losers too far. That's my feel. I don't know that. There is no language that is written to guarantee that, but I'm going off that premise. That's why I've got Oregon as the 5 seed. I've got Ole Miss as the 6 seed. Those are Big Ten and SEC championship game losers. I've got Miami, the ACC championship game loser, as the 7 seed. And then I've got Notre Dame. Now, again, the thinking there is Notre Dame, let's say it's a 1-loss team. If it's undefeated, maybe a different story. If Notre Dame's a 1-loss team, I think that they're going to keep these conference championship game losers ahead of them. I could be wrong on that, but for broad strokes purposes, looking at it from 5 months out, Oregon, Ole Miss, Miami, Notre Dame, 5, 6, 7, 8. What we know about those teams is they will host playoff games in the first round. Who are they going to play? How do we fill out 9, 10, 11, and 12? Georgia's going to be in this thing. I can see a world where Georgia doesn't win the SEC. I could even see a world where Georgia doesn't play for the SEC championship. I see no world where Georgia doesn't make the playoff. I've got Georgia as my 9 seed. I've got Bama right behind them as my 10 seed. Penn State is in the playoff as my 11 seed. And Liberty, the highest-ranked G5 conference champ, is my 12 seed. Here's what that means for matchups in the first round. That would mean we've got Liberty versus Oregon. And you may remember that from such games as the Fiesta Bowl. It was the Sarah McLachlan special of bowl season. It was a splattering. It was a body bag special. Well, we got Liberty looking to atone, probably as a 3 or 4 touchdown underdog, on the road at Oregon. We got Penn State going down to Oxford, which is lovely in December. Lovely. Penn State at Ole Miss. We got Bama at Miami. Come back to that in a second. And we've got Georgia at Notre Dame. Georgia at Notre Dame is a postcard game. That's incredible. That's, by the way, that's a lot of your fantasies out there. You guys who want to see Southern teams play up north. Well, how about going from Athens to South Bend in the second week or third week of December? There you go. I gave it to you. Immunity. How about that third game there? Alabama at Miami. To my Miami folks down there, how are you going to handle the ticket situation? If you guys get a home playoff game, you got to come through for me. You can't be letting that be like, when the Yankees used to come to Turner Field and 60-40 Yankee fans or Cub fans. You guys got to protect home field. Create home field, first off, and then protect home field. Because if Miami has a home playoff game and they play any of these big national brand teams, there's a risk of those teams doing to Miami what everyone in the SEC does to Vanderbilt. And that's, let's make a weekend of it in Nashville. Let's go take over their stadium. That can't be happening in the playoff. How does this all shake out? Well, here's my Final Four. This is sadistic stuff in this Final Four. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. We've got Ole Miss versus Texas in one side of the bracket, which, yes, is a rematch of the SEC championship game. And on the other side of the bracket, I've got Oregon versus Ohio State, which not only is a rematch of the Big Ten championship game, it's a rematch of the regular season. Those teams, if this piece of paper is right, play 3 times in a season. And at this point, if we were to get these matchups, we would have a very interesting and toxic conversation on our hands about how valuable, how important, or even how necessary conference championship games are. And someone would say, oh, they were very important because look at how much Texas benefited from not having to play. They had a first-round bye. But then there would be another voice that said, yeah, but the result was the same. And then they would say, oh, and by the way, over on the other side of the bracket, ditto. Also, I think you could make a point that Oregon, by losing the Big Ten championship game and having the 5 seed, got themselves an incredibly favorable draw. This 5 seed story is going to be an interesting story to follow. 5 seed does not get a bye, but what the 5 seed gets is a home playoff game in the first round against probably the G5 team. And then they go to the second round and they play the worst team with a bye. So maybe like the Big 12 champ. Oregon just got to the Final Four by playing Liberty and Oklahoma State. Ohio State may have had a first-round bye, but man, Ohio State got the winner of Georgia-Notre Dame in the second round. Be that as it may, I've got Ohio State making it, and I've got Texas making it. So Ohio State versus Texas is my national championship game right now. The pressure would be so immense. Even if they get to that point, there would be people saying, if Ryan Day doesn't win this game, this is a failure of a season, which is absurd. But I'm not wrong about that. I'm right that it's absurd, but I'm also right that it would be said. I'd pick them to get it done right now. I'd pick Ohio State to win the national championship over Texas. The powers that be in the television industry would love that Final Four. They would love that championship matchup. They would love to crown that champ. Ohio State, Texas, the best of the Big Ten, the best of the SEC, at least according to these predictions. So in a lot of ways, you'd get through all that mess, and then you'd arrive at the finish line like 7 months after we began. And if this were to go down this way, you'd look at it and you'd say, wow, you expanded the playoff, we gave buys, we gave auto bids, and we ended up with maybe the same matchup we were going to end up with anyway. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it's a lot messier than that, or maybe it really is that clean. So that's how I'm feeling right now. Of course, everyone disagrees with it. I don't need to know that you disagree with it. I need to know why, and I need to know who you have in their place, and I need to get reasoning. Also, it's July. So if we get through 3 weeks of August and fall camp and we have injuries here and we get good intel there, I may reassess like half of that. I already don't feel good about some of it. But there it is. Ole Miss, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, your Final Four. I have to thank you guys. Colin, actually, do you have that tweet that someone sent me yesterday? And I pointed out because I asked you guys to do a couple of things. Visit Academy, check out FanDuel, but then I ask you to keep the show free. It's very, very simple. Just subscribe to the channels. That's all I ask you to do. So in our industry, just to give you a little behind the scenes, there's a big push to put anything that does good behind a paywall. And I would rather bear crawl over broken glass than do that to this show. But the trade-off is we have to maintain our traffic, which we do. You guys do a great job of it. It's just this time of year, there are a lot of eyeballs on our show. So our numbers are phenomenal. We're the #1 college football show in all of digital media. It's never good enough. That's according to me, not according to management. All you have to do is subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast, and then get 5 of your friends to do the same thing. And the tweet I was mentioning was one of you actually documenting that you had swiped the old lady's phone while she wasn't looking, and she became a subscriber to the channel. And it's not going to hurt her. You know, what she doesn't know really will not hurt her in this sense. And in the aggregate, maybe she becomes a better college football fan. We're improving things. We're looking to make your life better by you bringing your friends and loved ones and possibly a spouse or two along for the ride. So that's all I ask. That's all we ask, and I appreciate you guys in advance because you've never not come through when we've occasionally asked you for that. Let's move along. Several what-ifs this year, not the least of which is, what if I were to do this show tonight and not mention the Twisters review? Well, it won't happen. I saw some of you asking in the live chat. No, that's coming. It's coming. Don't worry. Could be emotional, but it's coming. Immunity. Some of the biggest what-ifs in college football this year. Everyone's down on Auburn right now, but what if Peyton Thorne just has a career season? 2021 seems like forever ago, but he was at Michigan State then. Remember, he did have 3,200 yards, 27 touchdowns, 10 picks, and it was a season for the ages. They will remember it for a long time in East Lansing, and then everything went sideways for everyone, pretty much. And last year, Peyton Thorne's at Auburn. He's all the way down to a little over 1,700 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, 10 picks. So I will grant you, it's a stretch to be asking if he could have a career year. They did land Cam Coleman. He's a true freshman, but he's absolutely going to have the ball force-fed to him. They've got Keandre Lambert-Smith. They got him from Penn State. Rivaldo Fairweather, the tight ends down there. This is not a horrible stable of pass catchers. Far from it. If this happens, okay, if Peyton Thorne somehow puts it all together and Hugh Freeze finds a way to pull that out of him, what I think about is not Georgia and Alabama. Auburn probably still a healthy underdog in those games, even if they get pretty good quarterback play. What I'm thinking about is the Oklahoma game in Week 5. And Auburn starts 5 straight games at home, by the way. I'm thinking about the Oklahoma game. I'm thinking about a few weeks later, they go to Missouri. And then at Kentucky the week after that. These are games that would either be coin flip or Auburn lose. And I'm also thinking about A&M, second to last week of the season. If we're getting big-time quarterback play from Thorne, those go from toss-up, lean opponent to lean Auburn, maybe even solidly lean Auburn. And that's the difference in you going 5-7 or 6-6, and you going 8-4, 9-3, maybe sniffing 10-2 if maybe Georgia or Alabama's not as good as we think they're going to be. So, yeah, it would be a good sign. It would also make Hugh Freeze look like a genius because they didn't even go get a quarterback out of the portal. I don't think they're counting on Peyton Thorne delivering a career year. But if he does, you reserve the right to stand at the podium and go full I told you so mode to everyone in December. Next up, in the interest of fairness, let's go out to L.A. What if D'Anton Lynn does turn around USC's offense overnight? There is precedent for this, as my esteemed Trojan friends would have you not believe, they would have you know. UCLA in 2022, they were 87th in the country in yards allowed. They were 90th in points per game allowed. Enter D'Anton Lynn. Overnight, the very next year, they're up to 10th in yards allowed. They're up to 14th in points per game allowed. So you just quickly run the arithmetic in your head. Bring him over to USC. Doesn't even have to move if he doesn't want to. He can live in the same house. He comes over here. We were 121st last year in points per game defensively. We were 119th in yards per game allowed defensively. So maybe he doesn't make us top 10. Maybe he doesn't make us top 20. What if he just jumps us up into the top 50? That would be sizable. Mixed opinions as to whether he's going to do that. I don't think he will. But I could just flat out be wrong on that. Some of my USC folks could be right on that. So if he does that, well, what is USC? Well, USC is a Big Ten championship contender if he does that. Because it does two things. Number one, it creates a more balanced approach. Number two, it means you don't have to score 40 a game to win. And number three, because of number two, Miller Moss is not a quarterback who gets the weight of the world put on his shoulders, kind of like Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams knew, man, I can play at no less than a Heisman level if we're going to win today. That's the mentality that he had to have. I don't want Miller Moss having to think like that. And so if you get this kind of defensive performance, he won't have to. And lastly, what if Miami has another mediocre season? Well, the total's 9.5. Okay, so I would define mediocre for Miami as 8 wins or less. There's this weird territory that this could fall in, though, because they went 5-7 Mario's first year. They went 7-5 last year, 7-6 if you include the bowl game. If they went 8-4 this year, technically it would be improvement, but it really wouldn't be acceptable because this Miami team's way different than the last two. When you go and get Cam Ward at quarterback, and when you do what they did in the portal afterwards, and when you bake in all of these recruiting classes, well, the 2 recruiting classes you've had so far, it's supposed to bring you a lot more than 8 wins. So if they were 8 wins, or certainly if they were below 8 wins, well, you'd have a very predictable conversation about Mario. You'd have a predictable conversation about his staff, their way of doing things. This is, of course, assuming there's not massive amounts of injury, because that could explain away anything. But if they just kind of are what we expect them to be roster-wise, and it's good for nothing more than 7 or 8 wins, then that's a problem. That's a problem by anybody's metric, including theirs. I think that the conversation would be really rough around them. It wouldn't be hot seat rough. I will tell you that right now. It wouldn't be hot seat rough. Well, people may call for hot seat. That wouldn't be what happened there. There would just be a lot of soul searching that would have to happen. A whole lot. Think about the way you felt after the Georgia Tech game last year. That's how it would feel at the end of the season instead of just the end of one given game. They're watching us in Kingston, Tennessee. If I could peel this Post-it. They're watching us in Branson, Missouri, and Buffalo, New York. Something just happened now that we're through with the segment. Always got to make it through the segment because, see, Colin's going to go clip those and put them up as individual videos, which means if anything's going wrong, if you have a medical emergency, if someone's calling you, if there's a fly in the room, you get to the end of the segment, and then you deal with it. I had like a weird pain in my nose that's very similar to if you were to yank 37 nose hairs out at one time, and whomst amongst us hasn't done that before. And I don't know what it was, and now it's gone, but it made my eyes water for a second. But, what can you do? You got to play through it. I've got a couple of questions for you. And then I've got bowl predictions. And then we've got to go to the movies. It's a very, very eclectic show tonight. If you're watching live, I appreciate you. If you're watching tomorrow, if you're listening tomorrow, hey, make sure you subscribe. That's all I ask you to do. We do this show all year. It's nothing but college football. And we do it because you support it. And you support it because you probably feel like I do, and that you've looked around the places you used to go for college football coverage, and you've said, this kind of is not good anymore. Someone deliver an alternative, please. Here we are. We're delivering the alternative, and it will be here until the end of time as long as I don't screw it up and as long as you show your appreciation to management, not me, management, by subscribing. Thank you guys, because you've already done it. I just know we have several newbies per show, so I have to let them know what the deal is. Is Quinn Ewers going to be an elite quarterback this year at Texas? Let's just push all the chips in. State your opinion. Let it be known. Why is this important? Well, I'll tell you why. Because Texas may need it to win it all. The goal at Texas is to win a national title this year. So if they do that, they're not going to need pretty good quarterback play. There's going to come a time where Quinn Ewers has got to play at an elite level. And right now, he's really good. Hadn't been elite, really good. Last year, 3,500 yards, 22-6, touchdown to INT. That's pretty good. That is not elite. So he's got another year now. He's going to be elite. Is Sark going to pull an extra 10, 15, 20% out of him? He had crucial interceptions in the Red River Shootout against Oklahoma last year. He needed to outduel Michael Penix in a shootout game, in the semifinal, and he didn't do it. That last drive in particular, just inaccurate, didn't do it. When I watch Quinn Ewers, I look at a guy that I feel like has a ton of potential. I also look at a guy that to this point in his career feels like he leaves money on the table. I'm not about to break down quarterback mechanics when Steve Sarkisian's the guy coaching him day to day, but to the untrained eye, it looks loose. Sometimes it looks unorthodox. It just looks like he leaves a little bit on the table. So this is a developmental game. And it's the most developmental position in a developmental game. If he plays at an elite level this year, consistently, not flashes, consistently, then it's going to be noteworthy for an obvious reason, but also it'll mean he did it. There's not immense talent that's proven around him that could pull it out of him. He was surrounded by studs last year. Worthy and those guys, he had 4 skill guys taken in the top 3 rounds of the draft. Like A.D. Mitchell, not there anymore. Worthy, not there anymore. Jatavian Sanders, not there anymore. Brooks at running back, not there anymore. Even if all these new transfers pan out, you will not have a better group than he had last year. Or at least it's highly unlikely you do. So that doesn't mean he can't do it, but it'll mean he leveled up his game. Instead of Sark and his staff surrounding him with all this weaponry and those guys pulling that out of him. And if he can do that, there's no limit to what Texas can do, which is why I asked the question, will we get elite quarterback play out of him? Because if the answer is yes, that's a national title contender. If the answer is no, could be a tough first year in the SEC for Texas. And then you got to ask yourself, well, okay, who goes through Texas en route to maybe winning the SEC or maybe going to the playoff? Is Texas a playoff team? I still think yes, just probably well short of a title team if they don't get elite quarterback play. Next question has nothing to do with Texas. The next question is, if you had to guess right now, who do you think will be the best running team in the country this year? I think Georgia deserves consideration here. They went and got Trevor Etienne, who I mistakenly called Travis Etienne on last show, out of the portal. Georgia was aggressive in the portal, and he's one guy they got, and they will ride him this year behind one of the best offensive lines in the country. It's a style they want to play anyway, just bludgeon people. So they went and got him for a reason. They didn't get him to be part of. They didn't get him to sprinkle. They got him to ride, and I think they will. And if he's healthy, they'll have one of the best ground games in the country. I'll tell you another one, and that's Virginia Tech. It'll be a lot more quiet about it, but I think Virginia Tech with Kyron Drones, a dual threat quarterback, they're leading running back returns. He's a 5+ yard per carry kind of guy. 4 offensive linemen return, and just like Georgia, it's exactly in line with what they want to do. Rely on defense, hopefully the back end pans out, and then rely on being able to maybe not outman every team they play, but to be the most physical team. Virginia Tech should never be the second most physical team on the field. And if they're playing that style, that's a team that can run the ball very well. Oklahoma State will play. Do they play? No, they don't. Never mind. I was thinking about someone else. Oklahoma State, behind the most seasoned offensive line ever, and a returning Doak Walker Award winner and Ollie Gordon, how do you not put them in this conversation? I mean, Oklahoma State, it's interesting because you're watching a team like Utah come in, and Utah plays there early in the year, and I'm just interested to see who runs the ball more effectively, because it could very well be that Oklahoma State, who has struggled maybe in years past not being the most physical team in the world, maybe they're the one. Maybe they're the team. Out of all these teams that Utah is going to face in Big 12 play, maybe they're the one in the first year that gives them the toughest matchup. I'd put Oklahoma State there. I'd put Alabama there. What I'm not sure about with Bama is proven wide receiver depth. What I am sure about is Kalen DeBoer is going to find a way to score, and I know I got Milrose legs, and I know I got Jam Miller and Justice Haynes and Richard Young in that backfield, and I know I got an inside offensive line, plus Proctor returning at left tackle, that I can at least depend on, and a center that I don't think quarterback-center exchange will be nearly as big a deal this year with Brailsford coming in. I think they'll run the ball extremely effectively. I think Ole Miss will run the ball very effectively. But they lost Quinshon Judkins. They sure did. But they've got Ulysses Bentley, who is just as good and in time could be better. I would encourage you guys, if you don't believe that, go listen to friend of the program, Jim Nagy. Jim Nagy runs the Senior Bowl. The draft starts in Mobile, as we know. Jim Nagy runs the Senior Bowl, knows everything about every player on the planet. And one of the guys that I'd like for you to hear him talk about is Ulysses Bentley. There's going to be a popular talking point that there's a massive void on that roster without Judkins. And I'm not downplaying the quality of player Quinshon Judkins is. If Ole Miss loses this year, it won't be because they don't have him. Let me put it that way. So Dart can move as well. I think Ole Miss is going to run the ball very well. And UCF out of the rafters, but they're not really. I will get more pushback on putting UCF in this conversation than anybody. And the whole point of it is, let's talk about which teams will be the best running the ball this year. UCF was a top 5 running team last year. Did any of you in the room know that? Nope. Everyone's shaking their head no. And now they got KJ Jefferson at quarterback. They will run him, and then if they got a shot, they'll run him again. RJ Harvey was their leading rusher last year. He's back. Gus Malzahn in his best years, Gus Malzahn in any year, but especially his best years, they have run the ball. For some reason, people think of Gus Malzahn's offense at its best as this high-flying offense. It's not that at all. They run the ball to set up anything else they do. So I'll take UCF in that conversation as well. Let's go bold predictions. Bold prediction, let's see. Last show, I believe 3 out of the 4 bold predictions were 9.5 or bolder. And since we have a lot of new people listening to and watching the show, bold predictions are not from me. I did those earlier. Bold predictions are from the audience. And we have to go Scout's honor on this sort of thing. You claim that you believe this stuff enough to bet your own money on. I do not require bet slips. I probably should. But I got 4 of them tonight. So bold predictions tonight. What are you willing to bet your money on? What do you believe about this year? First up, Georgia, according to Arthur, will be in the SEC championship game, but they will not face a team that they played. There will not be a rematch. So that's noteworthy because Georgia plays Texas. Georgia plays Bama. Georgia plays Ole Miss. Georgia plays Tennessee. So we got the Dogs in the SEC championship game. Not hard to envision. But they got to be facing LSU, maybe? A&M? Missouri? Oklahoma? Those are the 5, 6, 8, and 9 odds teams, according to FanDuel. Texas is out of this thing. Ole Miss is out. Bama's out. That is a little tough for me to grab because, first off, Georgia just has to make it. Okay, it's a high-value proposition, but it's not a certainty. And then secondly, they got to make it and not face the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 7th best teams in the odds market in the SEC. So that's a 9.5. Congratulations. If Georgia faces LSU or A&M or Missouri or Auburn or anyone else in Atlanta other than like Texas and Ole Miss and Bama and Tennessee, you will get a chalice of supremacy, Arthur. Good luck. Next up, here's another one. Gorb from beautiful Savannah, Georgia. West Virginia wins the Southwest Conference. And then he put in parentheses, Big 12. I appreciate that. West Virginia has the 9th best odds to win this conference, so it's pretty bold. Their over-under win total is 6.5. So, yes, it's pretty bold. In 2023, though, just remember life in the Big 12. In 2023, Oklahoma State made it in. In 2022, Kansas State was not a top 2 team in the preseason odds market. They made it in. In 2021, Baylor was near the bottom of the odds. They made it in and won it. Kansas State won it the next year, by the way. So who cares that West Virginia has a 6.5 over-under win total? Well, I do. So this is a 9.5 on the boldness scale. They do also have a tough schedule. West Virginia plays 7 of the top 8 odds teams in the preseason Big 12 odds. And they got Penn State and at Pitt the first 3 weeks of the season. Now, those aren't conference games, but it could do one of 2 things. It could bang them up and make them a little mentally fragile, or it could embolden them and maybe they go on a run. Still, that's a 9.5, West Virginia winning it. Next up, some sick people in this world. I know what you're doing with these predictions. Don't think I don't know what you're doing. So, Noted from Birmingham, Alabama. Noted. That's the only name we have. Noted said 2 group of 5 teams will make the playoff. Well, no, they won't. So this is a 9.75 on the boldness scale. 1 is in no matter what. So we're just asking who that second team would be. You probably need 2 undefeated teams, okay? Because the first one's undefeated, they're in. The second one probably has to be undefeated too. Liberty has the best odds in all of college football to go undefeated. Did you hear what I said? FanDuel has this out right now. If you want to go bet this, FanDuel has odds to go undefeated in the regular season. And Liberty has the best odds. Is it because they have the best team in college football? Probably not. It's probably because they play Campbell and East Carolina and Kennesaw State and Jacksonville State. And the reason I keep just mentioning non-Power 4 teams is because they don't play a Power 4 team. So Liberty's probably going to make the playoff, just like 70 other teams would do if they faced this schedule. But we're all for auto bids, man. We're all for auto bids. Sarcasm. Who's making it in after them? Memphis has to play Florida State. UTSA has to play Texas. Tulane draws Kansas State and Oklahoma. Boise plays Oregon. App State plays Clemson. So at least there are major hurdles for those other teams to clear. Liberty doesn't have one. So I don't see 2 of them making it in. That's a 9.75 for 2 G5 teams to make it in on the boldness scale. And lastly, I respect this one, Mike. Mike is in Grove City, Ohio. I appreciate it. I respect it. It's very bold. Rutgers will win 10 games. 9.25. It's not crazy bold. It's not. They don't play Ohio State. They don't play Oregon. They don't play Penn State. They don't play Michigan. Greg Schiano, if he ran the scheduling office, would not change anything about Rutgers' schedule. Now, they do go to Virginia Tech. They do go to Nebraska. They go to USC. You're not playing in the Big Ten and not having a tough couple of road games. Washington, Whiskey, and Illinois at home. Winning 10 games is going to be a tough draw. Not impossible. Rutgers winning 10 is a 9.25 on the boldness scale, but their over-under win totals, Jesse, is at 6.5, right? So you start looking at that schedule. If you believe at all in Greg Schiano and company, you can find you 7 wins there pretty quickly. It's 6.5 and it's juiced to the under. So there you go. If you believe, that's free money. They're just offering it to you. Free money does not exist, people. However, having some skill and having some discipline and having proper money management could yield a positive result this fall. Check out FanDuel. Check out Friday Night Lines and check out FanDuel. One is brought to you by me. The other is not. FanDuel is the exclusive odds provider of this show. We always appreciate them. We were refreshing today. They're always bringing new stuff to the market. So like as of this week, you can do what I just said. If you think Liberty's going to go undefeated, you can go bet. If you think Georgia's going to go undefeated, if you think I'm wrong about that, if you think they can make it through 12-0, you can go bet that right now. If you think Georgia's going to miss the playoff, so you're on the total opposite end of that spectrum, you can also go bet that. Of course, you got some games of the year. They've got lines and totals for all the week 0 and week 1 games right now. FanDuel, exclusive odds provider of the show. We appreciate that. I am more nervous about what we're about to do than anything else in the show. So, most of you are here for college football. And if you're here for college football, that really concludes the show tonight. There is no more college football on the show. But friends, the show is not over. Colin, I will want this clipped, by the way. And I can't wait to see what you do with the thumbnail. This show is all college football, all year round, except there's one exception. You guys know that my other passion is storm chasing, and you know that in the spring, sometimes we'll move the show around because I'm out in the middle of nowhere and we are storm chasing. Twisters is in theaters now. Once upon a time, little JP was inspired by the original Twister. It was, for people like me, what Top Gun was for kids who wanted to be fighter pilots. Twister was, for kids like me, what Days of Thunder was for kids who wanted to be race car drivers. It had a massive, massive impact on me. I was already passionate about weather and atmospheric science when I was a kid. Twister just made me realize I wasn't the only one, and it opened up this whole new world. You mean there are people who actually get to go do what to this point I had only dreamed about? And I always told myself, I have a 2-part dream scenario for when I grow up. I'd love to be able to cover college football for a living, and I'd love to be able to afford to go storm chasing. And wouldn't you know it, we got both of them now. That's called a sweet spot. That's why we're never really aggressive to change things around here much, because you try and get happier than happy, and you can screw things up really quickly. I saw Twisters last night. Phenomenal job. Phenomenal job. Hats off to everyone involved. Several thoughts here. My first biggest takeaway, there will be no spoilers here, by the way. I know a lot of you haven't seen it yet. First biggest takeaway, they didn't hijack the movie. Hollywood did not hijack the movie. It was within reason. The action scenes passed the test. You got to understand, the trade-off for having storm chasing be featured in a blockbuster film is you got to have some Hollywood in there. That's got to happen, and everyone understands that. Otherwise, it would be very boring, and we would call that a documentary, and I'd love it, but most of you wouldn't. So they nailed it on that front. The characters work. Glenn Powell, man, probably watches every show. Hats off to you, brother. I did not know if you'd be able to pull it off, but you pulled it off. You could pass for being one of us. Initiation would still have to happen, but you could pass for being one of us. There was no social commentary in this thing. There was no political agenda pushed, which was one of the big fears in the storm chasing community, and the big fear on people who just want to go watch a movie, period, is, are you going to try and shove something down my throat? No. Oh, I get to just enjoy a movie with the things that I have to deal with every other place in the outside world not included. What a welcome relief. Hats off to Twisters for doing that. And once again, just like in 1996, they nailed the vibe. The vibe, I can't explain. I do this stuff multiple times a year. I'm out in Oklahoma or Kansas or Missouri or Nebraska or Texas multiple times a year chasing tornadoes. Illinois, Iowa. And there is a culture, it's very small, it's very confined. Therefore, it's very hard to understand because almost everyone is an outsider to it when it comes to storm chasing. Hollywood, 2 times out of 2, shockingly, has nailed the vibe. They kind of gave you a good idea of what it's like. These people in this world are very unapologetic about how passionate they are. Now, maybe in your normal 9-to-5 job, the Reed Timmers of the world notwithstanding, you kind of got to sanitize it a little bit. And you can't just nerd out on everyone. You can't be checking Radar Omega or radar scope every 5 minutes at your cubicle. But when you get out there in the field, you can. People are unapologetic about how much they love it. So they nailed all that. And I could not be happier and prouder of the folks who made this movie for that. Now, the other thing that mattered a lot to folks like us is seeing storm chasing presented the right way. And it makes some folks emotional to watch it because they love it. I love it. We love it. And it's extremely hard to understand because 99.9% of the population doesn't get it. They're terrified by it, and they want nothing to do with it. The way people talk to you about chasing tornadoes is the same way you would talk to someone, and I don't say this to joke around, that has a substance abuse issue in your family. Every one of us has someone in our social circle or our family who's dealt with substance abuse. And if you hadn't, you probably will one day. The way you talk to them is you try and encourage them to stop. You try and encourage them not to do that thing because it's very dangerous and it could cut their life short. People talk to folks who chase tornadoes the same way for obvious reasons. And the thing about it is, if you're passionate about it, it doesn't matter. You respect it. You're happy they care about you. But it goes in one ear and out the other because if you've ever seen tornadoes in person and you're the very, very small minority that's drawn to it, it's no different than a drug. I have a total, like, what do they call it, Colin? Like straight edge lifestyle. I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't do drugs. But that's one thing I do that I would imagine has me hooked about as much as that stuff. Folks love it. Don't apologize for it. They love it. And so when someone comes along and they're going to put that on the big screen, you're kind of worried that it's going to mock a lifestyle that you really love. But when they do it like they did in Twisters or the original, it really makes you happy because it's presented the right way. It's not like this knock comedic commentary on it. It's just straight up throwing storm chasing in your face, and it's raw and unfiltered, and if you like it, fine. If you don't, fine. Oklahoma as a state, the state of Oklahoma won this movie. unbelievable postcard of Oklahoma. It's like a love story to the state of Oklahoma. There's such immense state pride in Oklahoma. Most people who have never been there, they call it flyover country. They don't get it, and they question how anyone could be insane enough to live in a part of the country that deals with this kind of stuff so often. Well, because they love their home, first off, and secondly, they take pride in it. They take pride in it the same way you take pride in where you live, despite the fact that you got earthquakes in California, you got hurricanes along both coasts, Atlantic and Gulf. You live there anyway. Why? Because you love it, and you just accept the risk. And those of you who have lived there a long time, you kind of even embrace it. You kind of even understand, man, this is kind of part of what makes our culture. It makes us unique. There's more education about severe weather per capita in states like Oklahoma than anywhere. It's unbelievable. Even like a gas station attendant who knows nothing about weather, has never darkened the door of a hallway in a college professorial setting, they'll tell you, man, it looks like that cell over there near Lawton may have a little hook on it. That'll be $9.95, by the way. It's crazy. So Oklahoma is an amazing place. I spent a lot of time there. I had to get about 20 minutes into this movie before I saw a place that we've been chasing at just in the last few months. Fairview, Oklahoma is in the middle of nowhere. We were out there this spring. Hat tip Frankie Shepard, because he still had pictures from out there. I chased with him a lot that I didn't have. So Fairview is a place in the movie where like 20 minutes in, the first time those storm chasing teams converge, it's the middle of nowhere. There's like a three-way intersection. There's some grain silos. There's an old rundown service station, literal middle of nowhere. And we were there this past spring. Colin, you got that Doppler radar picture? There is a blue dot on this map just north of Fairview, and it's about 25 miles east-northeast of a tornado-worn cell. And there we are. That blue dot is the exact same spot as one of the scenes in this movie. Unbeknownst to us, they had filmed there a few months beforehand. And unbeknownst to me, Colin, show me the other picture. Unbeknownst to me, the dude I was chasing with took a picture of me. Same white t-shirt. For those of you who doubt that I chase in the same white tee that I do the show in, that right there is the exact same place that movie scene was filmed. And when you watch the movie, or if you haven't already, if you watch it, you will know exactly what I'm talking about, and you'll recognize that. Enid, Lawton, Oklahoma, Chickasha, Shawnee, El Reno, Norman, Stillwater, all of them represented, and they didn't Hollywood it. They went out into the field and they shot in Oklahoma. Hat tip for that. There were some beefs that some of you had with this movie. I had some things that I wanted to nitpick a little bit. So the soundtrack has been a big point of contention for some of you. I thought the soundtrack was wonderful. You guys, some of you thought there wasn't enough rock on it. So it's a lot of country. And the first one had like Van Halen and Goo Goo Dolls, and I think the Twister original soundtrack is the most underrated movie soundtrack known to mankind. So you don't have to sell me on the original. I loved it, loved it, loved it. This one I think is really good too, but you are right about that. There wasn't as big a mix in genre in it. I know the Luke Combs song is getting a majority of the run right now. Out of Oklahoma by Lainey Wilson is the best song in that movie. Out of Oklahoma is phenomenal. I think it's the best song she's ever done. I don't have Lainey Wilson posters on my wall or anything. Like, I'm not signed to the same label as her. Out of Oklahoma, I don't even care if you don't go see the movie. Just look up the song. Lainey Wilson, Out of Oklahoma. It's really good. The score of the movie is where they missed. The original score of the original Twister was about as perfect a fit orchestrally with a movie as you'll get. Field of Dreams was done really well too. Titanic. Some of these movies are synonymous with their scores. The score missed the mark in this movie. That is one of the biggest beefs I had. We were leaving the theater last night. I told Savannah, I did not think the score at all fit the movie. It's like they took score from another action movie and they just placed it in this one. It's a nitpick, but it's something that really stood out to me. There was not a ton of overlap. There was no overlap in story between the first one and this one, which surprised me. There were not a lot of callbacks or references at all to the first one, which surprised me. And frankly, I would have done it differently. I thought character and story development could have taken a deeper dive. It was good enough, but it could have taken a deeper dive. But all in all, I loved it. I think every one of you will love it when you go see it. It's how movie making's supposed to be done, man. Also, it dawned on me that I got to get a handshake that involves the twirly thing. I've never even seen that done before. I have been in the field storm chasing for years. I have never had it occur to me, I need a storm chasing handshake. But I'm going to work on it because I got a few months before next spring gets here. And not to discount second season in the fall, but I'm busy in the fall. So I give this movie 4 Chalai out of 5. Strongly recommend. This will not be the last time we debut the Chalai rating system on you, but 4 out of 5 Chalai is the highest rating I've given a movie this year so far. And how about finishing just a couple of $1 million behind Oppenheimer for the biggest opening weekend release of the year? Wow. So, yes, if you're wondering whether you need to, definitively yes, go see Twisters. Thank you guys so much for watching the show tonight. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel on the way out, at Late Kick Josh on all the socials. Until next time, we'll be on the road all week, Tuesday and Thursday. I'm going to bring you something for Director Colin. I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Producer Jesse's in the house as well. Take care, and God bless.